I'm Kelly, 35, a single mom living in Fort Collins, Colorado. My daughter Grace, 13, has Down syndrome. She's the light of my life, always smiling, always finding joy in the little things like splashing in the pool. But my sister Denise never saw her that way. For years, Denise made snide remarks about Grace's disability, little jabs about her being slow or needing too much help. I brushed it off thinking she'd come around. Then she invited Grace for a swim day with her kids at the community pool. I hesitated. Denise wasn't exactly warm with Grace, but I wanted Grace to have fun with her cousins, to feel included. Big mistake. Denise's idea of a prank was to push my daughter into the deep end of the pool, knowing she couldn't swim there. Grace nearly drowned. When I got the call that she was in the hospital, my world stopped. Denise just laughed it off, saying, "It was just a joke, Kelly, relax." A joke my daughter could have died. When I called the police, Denise's smug face turned pale. She knew she'd gone too far. Before I share how my sister's cruel prank put Grace in danger, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to hear more stories about fighting for those who need it most. 7 years ago, my world turned upside down when my husband Mark died in a construction accident. Grace was only 6, just starting to show her bright, bubbly personality despite her Down syndrome. I was 28, suddenly a widow, juggling a bank teller job in Fort Collins, Colorado, and raising a daughter who needed extra care, doctor's appointments, speech, therapy, special education plans. Grace's condition affects her learning and communication. She takes longer to process things, needs clear instructions, and sometimes struggles with social cues, but her heart is pure gold. She loves swimming, giggling with her cousins, and drawing colorful pictures that cover our fridge. I'd do anything to see her smile, even when life felt like it was crumbling. Before Mark's death, my sister Denise Porter and I were tight. Growing up, we shared everything: secrets, late-night talks, dreams about the future. Denise, 3 years older, was the bold one, always ready to take charge. I looked up to her, leaned on her when things got tough. After Mark passed, she was there helping with meals, watching Grace so I could catch my breath. Her husband, Christopher Porter, a quiet civil engineer, would tag along, fixing things around my house: a leaky faucet, a wobbly chair. Their kids, Haley, now 15, and Dylan, now 11, were Grace's favorite people. Haley especially had a knack for making Grace feel special, patiently playing games or helping her with crafts. Dylan was younger, more impressionable, sometimes mimicking his mom's tone without realizing it. Things started shifting after Denise and Christopher got married 8 years ago. Denise changed, not all at once, but in small, cutting ways. She'd make comments about Grace, little digs that stung. At a family barbecue, when Grace struggled to hold a sparkler, Denise said loudly, "She's almost 7. Kelly, shouldn't she be past that by now?" The backyard went quiet. Christopher changed the subject, but Grace's confused frown broke my heart. I brushed it off, told myself Denise didn't mean it. She was just stressed, maybe running her real estate business, always chasing the next big sale. Over time, the remarks got sharper. When we'd go on family walks, Denise would sigh if Grace lagged behind her steps, careful and deliberate. "Can't we move faster?" "My kids are bored," she'd say, glancing at me like I was holding everyone back. Once at a Christmas dinner, she suggested I look into special facilities for Grace, saying it'd give me my life back. I was floored. Grace wasn't a burden, she was my daughter. Christopher just sat there, avoiding my eyes, while Haley shot her mom a look and helped Grace with her plate. I bit my tongue, not wanting to ruin the holiday, not wanting to lose the family connection Grace cherished. Denise's attitude seeped into our family dynamic. Our weekly dinners dropped to monthly, then just holidays. When I tried talking to her about her comments, she'd roll her eyes. "You're too sensitive, Kelly. I'm just being honest. Grace needs more than you can handle." Christopher would back her up, not with words, but with silence, letting her speak for both of them. It hurt seeing my sister pull away, seeing the sister I loved turn into someone who made Grace feel less than. But Grace adored her cousins, especially Haley, who'd spend hours teaching her new swim strokes or braiding her hair. For Grace's sake, I kept the peace-made excuses planned outings where Grace could shine like low-key picnics or movie nights at home. The worst came 2 years ago at Dylan's birthday party. Grace, excited to join the kids' games, tripped while running after a balloon. Denise laughed, not a kind laugh, but a sharp, mocking one. "Maybe stick to sitting still," Grace, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Haley rushed to help Grace up, glaring at her mom while Dylan hesitated, torn between joining the laughter and following his sister's lead. I pulled Denise aside, my voice shaking. "That's enough, Denise. She's trying her best." She shrugged, said I was overreacting, that kids need to toughen up. Christopher, as usual, said nothing, just handed out cake like nothing happened. I took Grace home early, her eyes wet with tears she didn't fully understand. After that, I limited our time with Denise. I'd invite Haley and Dylan over without their parents, or we'd meet my parents, Susan and Thomas Watson, for Sunday brunches at their house. Mom and Dad were Grace's biggest cheerleaders, always showing up with coloring books or taking her to the park. They saw Denise's behavior but urged me to keep trying. "She's family," Kelly Mom would say. "Give her time." I wanted to believe Denise could change, that she'd see Grace for the amazing kid she was. Grace loved her aunt even when Denise didn't deserve it, always asking when we'd see Aunt Denise again. It killed me to hear, but I didn't want to cut Grace off from her family, from the cousins who made her light up. So when Denise called last month, all smiles, inviting Grace to a swim day at the community pool with Haley and Dylan, I paused. It wasn't like her to reach out. "Haley's been begging to take Grace swimming," she said. "It'll be fun, Kelly, a real family day." My gut screamed no, Denise had never shown real care for Grace's needs. But Haley got on the phone, her voice bright. "Please, Aunt Kelly, I'll watch Grace the whole time." Grace overheard and started bouncing, chanting about the pool. Against my better judgment, I said yes, hoping this was Denise turning a corner, wanting to believe family could mean something again. I prepared everything: Grace's swim gear, a medical info sheet listing her limits, like avoiding deep water where she couldn't stand. I thought I'd covered every base. I was wrong. That choice, that moment of trust, set off a chain of events I'd regret for the rest of my life. I spent the week preparing. Grace's swim bag was packed with her goggles, a towel, and a water bottle. I typed up a medical info sheet listing her Down syndrome, her limits in deep water, and emergency contacts. "No deep end," I wrote in bold. "Grace can't swim where she can't stand it. Causes panic, and she could choke." I added notes about her speech therapy exercises in case she got overwhelmed, and my phone number triple-checked. The night before, I called Denise to go over everything. "Grace needs to stay in the shallow end," I said, reading from the sheet. "If she gets scared, help her sit down and breathe slowly. She'll show you how. Her inhaler's in her bag if she starts coughing." Denise cut me off, her tone impatient. "Kelly, I've got this. I've raised 2 kids, you know. We're not going deep sea diving." I pressed on. "Please, Denise, no deep water. It's not safe for her." She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Fine, shallow end only. Relax, we'll have fun." Christopher promised to be there too, which gave me some comfort. He wasn't hands-on like Haley, but he'd keep an eye out, or so I hoped. Haley texted me that night, bubbling with plans. "We'll do the kiddie slides. Aunt Kelly, Grace loves those." Her enthusiasm eased my nerves, but a knot still sat in my stomach. Grace was so excited she barely slept, laying out her swimsuit and flip-flops before bed. "Can I bring my floaties?" she asked, her voice bright. "Sure, sweetheart," I said, tucking her in. "Just stay with Haley and Aunt Denise, okay? If you feel scared, tell them right away." She nodded, reciting my phone number like a mantra. 555-2381, she said proudly. I kissed her forehead, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. Saturday morning, Denise's SUV pulled into our driveway at 9 sharp. Grace was ready, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her smile wide enough to light up the street. Haley hopped out to help Grace into the back seat, buckling her in carefully. Dylan waved from the window, already playing on his phone. Denise stayed behind the wheel, barely glancing at me. "We're running late, Kelly," she called through the open window. Gotta beat the weekend crowd. I handed her the medical info sheet. Please read this, Denise, I said, holding her gaze. No deep water, no exceptions. Call me if anything feels off. She took the folder, tossing it onto the passenger seat without a look. Got it. We'll be back by 6. Haley leaned out, her voice reassuring. I'll watch her, Aunt Kelly. Grace gave me a thumbs up, her face pure joy. I waved as they pulled away, standing in the driveway, fighting the urge to call them back. The morning dragged. I tried focusing on work, balancing accounts for the bank, but kept checking my phone. Denise sent a few texts early on. At 10:30, at the pool, lines are short. At 11:15, Grace is splashing around, having a blast. By noon, she texted lunch at the snack bar. All good. The updates were brief, but they calmed me. Cheryl was there coaching a swim class, so I figured she'd keep an eye out too. I texted her to confirm. Grace is with Haley in the shallow end, Cheryl replied. She's smiling like crazy. I exhaled, telling myself I was overthinking. Grace deserved a fun day, a chance to be a kid with her cousins. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. By 2 o'clock, the texts stopped. I called Denise straight to voicemail. I tried Haley, then Dylan. Nothing. My stomach churned. Pools are loud, I reasoned, phones get tucked away. But my mother's intuition, honed by years of watching Grace's every step, screamed danger. At 3:20, Cheryl texted Kelly, call me now. My heart sank. I dialed, hands shaking. Kelly, it's bad, Cheryl said, her voice tight. Grace is in the first aid station. She went under in the deep end, she's coughing, not responding well. Paramedics are coming. My blood froze. The deep end, Cheryl, I told Denise. She cut me off. It wasn't an accident. Haley saw Denise push her. She's freaking out, hiding in the bathroom to call you. I grabbed my keys, already running to the car. Push her, Cheryl, what the hell happened? Cheryl's voice broke. Denise said it was a prank to make Grace braver. Kelly, get here fast. I called Haley as I sped toward the pool, breaking every speed limit. Her voice was a whisper, trembling. Aunt Kelly, I'm so sorry. Mom pushed Grace into the deep end. Grace was screaming, she couldn't swim there. I tried to stop her, showed her your paper, but Mom said Grace was being a baby, that she needed to grow up. My vision blurred with rage. Where's Grace now? I demanded. With the medics, Haley said. She went under, started choking. Cheryl pulled her out, but she's not waking up right. Mom took my phone, but I got it back to call you. I swallowed my panic. Haley, you did good. Tell the medics I'm Grace's mom and I'm authorizing an ambulance. If your mom tries to stop them, get Cheryl or security. I'm almost there. She sniffled. Hurry, please. The 15-minute drive to the community pool felt like an eternity. I called 911 en route, explaining Grace's Down syndrome, her fear of deep water, and Denise's reckless stunt. The dispatcher patched me through to the paramedics, and I rattled off Grace's medical history, her sensitivity to stress, her inhaler, the risks of choking or seizures if she panicked. I tried Christopher's number, left voicemails that grew sharper each time. Christopher, Grace is hurt. Denise pushed her into the deep end. Call me back now. I parked crookedly by the pool entrance, flashed my membership card, and sprinted to the first aid station, ignoring the stares from families in swimsuits. Inside, Grace lay on a cot, her face pale, an oxygen mask strapped to her mouth. Cheryl stood beside her, holding her hand while a pool medic checked her pulse. Haley hovered nearby, tears streaming down her face. Dylan sat in a corner, clutching his phone, looking scared and small. Kelly, Cheryl said, rushing to me, she's stable, but her breathing's rough. The paramedics are almost here. I dropped to my knees beside Grace, my hands trembling as I touched her cold cheek. Sweetheart, I'm here, I whispered, my voice breaking. Her eyes were closed, her chest rising unevenly. The medic glanced up. She inhaled water, ma'am. We're monitoring for secondary drowning. Her lungs are stressed. Secondary drowning. My mind raced, picturing Grace's terrified face under the water. Denise stood by the door, arms crossed, her expression a mix of defiance and unease. Kelly, thank God you're here, she said, stepping forward. It was just a little push, a joke to get her over her fear. She's fine. Just shaken. I whirled on her fury, drowning my fear. A joke, Denise. You pushed my daughter into water she can't handle. She's in an oxygen mask. Denise flinched but doubled down. You're blowing this out of proportion. Kids need to face their fears. I was helping her. Haley stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. That's a lie, Mom. Grace said no. I showed you Aunt Kelly's sheet. You laughed, said she was too coddled. Denise's eyes narrowed. Haley, stay out of this. You're making it worse. The medic interrupted. Ma'am, your daughter's showing signs of acute respiratory distress, likely from the stress and water inhalation. This isn't minor. I turned to him, my voice steady despite the panic. She has Down syndrome. Deep water can trigger panic attacks, even seizures. I gave Denise a sheet saying exactly that. The medic nodded, jotting notes. The paramedics will take her to the hospital for observation. Denise scoffed. Hospital for a little water. This is ridiculous. I ignored her, focusing on Grace as the paramedics arrived, their radios crackling. They checked her vitals, hooked up a portable monitor, and lifted her onto a stretcher. I'm going with her, I said, grabbing my purse. I turned to Haley. Thank you for calling me. You probably saved her life. Haley nodded, tears spilling over. I'm sorry, Aunt Kelly. I should have stopped her. As the paramedics wheeled Grace out, Denise followed, her voice rising. Kelly, you can't seriously think this is my fault. It was supposed to be fun. I didn't look back, my focus on Grace's shallow breaths. In the ambulance, I held her hand, the monitors beeping steadily. A paramedic asked about the incident. My sister pushed her into the deep end. I said, my voice flat. I gave her a medical sheet saying no deep water. Grace can't swim there, it's not safe with her Down syndrome. Denise called it a prank. The paramedic's jaw tightened. Ma'am, we're required to report suspected child endangerment. I nodded, a cold resolve settling in. Do it. This wasn't an accident. She knew what she was doing. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, I realized this wasn't just a mistake. Denise had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and I was done making excuses for her. The hospital's emergency room was chaos, nurses, rushing monitors, beeping, the sharp smell of antiseptic hitting me like a wave. I pushed through the double doors, my heart pounding, and found Grace in a curtained bay, hooked up to an oxygen mask, her small frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. A Dr. Susan Hayes was checking her chart, her face calm but serious. Cheryl stood nearby, her swim coach uniform still damp, her eyes red from holding back tears. Haley hovered by Grace's side, clutching her cousin's hand, her face streaked with guilt and fear. Dylan sat on a plastic chair, staring at the floor, his knees pulled up tight. Denise was by the window, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of annoyance and forced concern. Christopher hadn't arrived yet. My voicemails to him were still unanswered. Kelly, Cheryl said, rushing to me, her voice low. Grace is stable, but her lungs took a hit. They're watching for fluid buildup, it could get worse. I dropped beside Grace, my hands shaking as I touched her cheek, cold under the oxygen mask. Sweetheart, I'm here. I whispered, my throat tight. Her eyes fluttered but stayed closed, her breath shallow and ragged. Dr. Hayes glanced up. Ms. Watson, your daughter inhaled a lot of water, likely from panic in the deep end. Her Down syndrome makes her more prone to respiratory distress under stress. We've given her oxygen and medication to ease her breathing, but she'll need monitoring for at least 24 hours. I nodded, barely processing, my eyes fixed on Grace's pale face. Is she going to be okay? I asked, my voice barely steady. We're optimistic, Dr. Hayes said, but we need to watch for secondary drowning or seizures given her medical history. Denise stepped forward, her voice cutting through the haze. Kelly, thank God you're here. This is all being blown way out of proportion. It was just a little push, a prank to help Grace get over her fear of deep water. She's fine, just being dramatic. My blood boiled, but I kept my eyes on Grace, counting her breaths to stay grounded. Dramatic, I said, my voice low, dangerous. Denise, you pushed my daughter into water she can't swim in. She's in a hospital bed fighting to breathe. You call that a prank? Denise flinched, her confidence wavering, but she doubled down. You're overreacting, Kelly. Kids need to face their fears. I was doing her a favor. She'd have been fine if she didn't panic so much. Haley's head snapped up, her hands clenching. That's not true, Mom, she said, her voice trembling but fierce. Grace said no. I showed you Aunt Kelly's sheet. You laughed, said she was too babied. You knew she couldn't swim there. Denise's face hardened. Haley, be quiet. You're making this worse, you don't understand. I turned to my sister, fury drowning out the hospital noise. Don't you dare silence her, Denise. Haley's telling the truth, isn't she? You ignored my instructions, ignored Grace's pleas, and pushed her into danger. Denise rolled her eyes, but her hands shook slightly. Kelly, you're turning this into some big conspiracy. It was a split-second decision. I thought she'd be okay when she tried it. You coddle her too much. Always have. Cheryl stepped in, her voice sharp. Denise, I saw it happen. Grace was screaming, flailing in the deep end. You didn't even move to help. I had to jump in. That's not a prank, that's reckless. Denise shot Cheryl a glare. Stay out of this, Cheryl. You're not family. Dr. Hayes interrupted, her tone firm. Ms. Watson, I need to know exactly what happened to assess Grace's condition fully. I pulled out my phone, showing her a digital copy of the medical info sheet. I gave Denise this, I said, my voice steady despite the rage. It says, no deep water. Grace's Down syndrome makes it dangerous. She can panic, choke, or seize. Denise knew this, and Grace told her no. Haley showed her the sheet too. Dr. Hayes scanned the document, her expression darkening. This is clear as day, she said. Pushing a child with these limitations into deep water is extremely dangerous. Denise scoffed louder this time. Dangerous? She's 13, not a toddler. I was trying to help her grow up, not hurt her. Haley stood, her voice breaking. Mom, stop lying. Grace was crying, begging you not to make her go near the deep end. You said Aunt Kelly was too soft, that Grace needed to act normal. You pushed her and she went under. Dylan looked up, his eyes wide, torn between his mom and his sister. Is that true, Mom? He asked, his voice small. Denise whirled on him. Dylan, stay out of it. This is adult stuff. I stepped closer, my voice shaking with rage. Denise, you didn't just ignore my rules. You ignored Grace, a child who trusted you. She could have died. Do you get that? Denise's face paled, but she held her ground. She didn't die, Kelly. You're making me the villain here, but I was trying to include her, make her part of the family. The paramedic's words in the ambulance echoed in my head, suspected child endangerment. I pulled out my phone, my hands steady, now fueled by a cold determination. You're not getting away with this, Denise, I said, dialing 911 again. Her eyes widened. What are you doing? I ignored her, speaking clearly to the dispatcher. I'm at Fort Collins General ER. My sister Denise Porter deliberately pushed my 13-year-old daughter, who has Down syndrome, into the deep end of a pool, knowing she couldn't swim there. Grace is in the hospital with respiratory distress. I'm reporting this as child endangerment. Denise's jaw dropped, her smugness gone. Kelly, you can't be serious. You're calling the cops on me. Over a pool prank. I kept my eyes on Grace, ignoring her. The dispatcher promised officers would arrive soon. Cheryl pulled me aside, her voice low. Kelly, I got the pool's security footage from my boss, Tom Bradley. It shows everything: Denise pushing Grace, struggling, me jumping in. I'll give it to the police. I nodded, gratitude mixing with my anger. Thank you, Cheryl. That's huge. Haley overheard, her eyes filling with tears. Aunt Kelly, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop her, I swear. I hugged her, my voice soft. Haley, you did everything right. Calling me saved Grace. You're a hero. She shook her head, sobbing. I should have grabbed her sooner. I held her tighter. This isn't your fault, honey. It's your mom's. 2 police officers arrived. Officer Diane Larson, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, and Officer Mark Reynolds, younger but calm. They introduced themselves, pulling out notebooks. Ms. Watson. Officer Larson said we got your call about a child endangerment incident. Can you walk us through it? I recounted everything: the medical info sheet, Grace's Down syndrome, Denise's promise to stay in the shallow end, her deliberate push into deep water, Grace's near drowning, and Haley's call. I showed them the digital sheet on my phone. Denise knew the risks, I said. Grace told her no. Haley showed her my instructions, and she still pushed her. Officer Reynolds glanced at Grace, still unconscious, and frowned. This is serious. We'll need statements from everyone involved. Officer Larson turned to Denise, who was pacing now, her face flushed. Ms. Porter, we need your side of the story. Denise straightened, her voice dripping with fake concern. Officers? This is a huge misunderstanding. I took my niece swimming to include her, make her feel normal. I gave her a little nudge into the deep end to help her face her fears. Kids need that sometimes. I didn't know she'd react like this. Haley's voice cut through, sharp and angry. That's not what happened. Grace was screaming. She couldn't swim there. You laughed at her. Mom said she was embarrassing you. Denise spun on her daughter, her voice venomous. Haley, enough. You're twisting this to make me look bad. Officer Reynolds stepped in. Young lady, we'll take your statement too. Don't be afraid to tell the truth. Cheryl spoke up, her tone steady. Officers, I'm Cheryl Adams, the swim coach. I saw Denise push Grace into the deep end. Grace was panicking, couldn't stay afloat. I pulled her out myself. The pool's security footage backs this up. I've got it ready for you. Officer Larson nodded, jotting notes. That's helpful, Ms. Adams. We'll review the footage. Denise's face drained of color, her hands fidgeting. Footage. You're making this sound like I tried to hurt her. It was just a stupid mistake. I turned to her. My voice cold. A mistake, Denise. You laughed while my daughter was drowning. You called her a baby for being scared. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Christopher burst through the ER doors, his face pale, his work boots still dusty from a construction site. Kelly. What's going on? I got your messages. Is Grace okay? He glanced at Denise, then at Grace, his eyes widening. What happened? I faced him, my voice flat. Your wife pushed Grace into the deep end of the pool, Christopher. She knew Grace couldn't swim there, knew it could kill her. Grace is here because of her. Christopher's jaw tightened, but he looked at Denise, waiting for her to explain. She grabbed his arm, her voice pleading. Chris, it's not like that. I was trying to help Grace, make her braver. Kelly's twisting this. You know how protective she is. Christopher's eyes flicked to Haley, who was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Haley, he said softly. What did you see? Haley took a shaky breath. Dad, Mom pushed Grace into the deep end. Grace was crying, said she couldn't swim there. I showed Mom Aunt Kelly's paper. She laughed, said Grace needed to stop acting like a baby. Then Grace went under and Cheryl had to save her. Christopher's face darkened, his hands clenching. Denise? Is this true? Denise stammered, her voice rising. It wasn't like that, Chris. I didn't mean for her to get hurt. It was supposed to be fun. Christopher stepped back, shaking his head. You knew she couldn't swim there. Kelly told you, Haley told you. What were you thinking? Denise's eyes darted between us, her composure cracking. You're all ganging up on me. I'm her aunt. I'd never hurt her on purpose. Officer Larson interrupted, her voice firm. Ms. Porter, we'll need you to come with us to give a formal statement. Denise froze, her eyes wide. A statement? You're treating me like a criminal over a pool game. Officer Reynolds nodded. Given the allegations and the child's condition, we need to investigate. Let's keep this calm. As they led Denise to a private area, she shot me a look. Part shock, part fury. Kelly, you're destroying our family over this, she hissed. I didn't respond, my focus back on Grace, whose breathing seemed slightly steadier. Dr. Hayes returned, updating me. Her oxygen levels are improving, but we're keeping her in ICU overnight. You can stay with her. I sat by Grace's bed, holding her hand, the weight of the day crashing over me. Haley curled up in a chair nearby, her eyes red. Aunt Kelly, she whispered. Is Grace going to be okay? I forced a smile, my voice soft. She's a fighter, Haley. The doctors are taking care of her. Christopher approached, his face haggard. Kelly, I don't know what to say. I should have been there. I didn't know Denise would... He trailed off, glancing at Haley. I'm sorry. I looked at him, my voice firm. Christopher, your wife crossed a line. I'm not letting this slide. Grace deserves better. He nodded, his eyes on Grace, a mix of guilt and anger flickering across his face. As the officers returned to take Haley's and Cheryl's statements, I knew this was just the beginning. Denise had shattered something that couldn't be fixed, and I was ready to make sure she faced the consequences. Grace stayed in the ICU for 2 days, her small body fighting to clear the water from her lungs. I barely left her side, sleeping in a stiff hospital chair, my hand wrapped around hers. Her oxygen mask came off on the second day, and her eyes fluttered open, her voice weak but clear. Mom, I was so scared, she whispered, tears pooling. I hugged her gently, careful of the monitors. I know, sweetheart, I said, my voice cracking. You're safe now, I've got you. Her nightmares started that night, thrashing, crying out about water closing over her head. Dr. Susan Hayes referred us to a child psychologist, Dr. Emily Carter, who specialized in trauma and developmental disabilities. Grace is showing signs of post-traumatic stress, Dr. Carter explained after their first session. The betrayal by a trusted family member combined with the physical trauma hit her hard. She'll need regular therapy to process this. Denise's actions didn't just hurt Grace, they shattered our family. The police investigation moved fast. Officer Diane Larson called me the day after Grace's admission, updating me on the case. We've reviewed the pool's security footage, she said, her voice grim. It clearly shows Denise pushing Grace into the deep end despite Grace's protests and Haley's attempts to intervene. We've got statements from Haley, Cheryl, and pool staff who heard Grace screaming. The DA is pursuing charges of child endangerment. I exhaled, a mix of relief and dread. What happens next? I asked. Denise will be formally charged, Officer Larson replied. Given the evidence and Grace's condition, it's being treated as a misdemeanor, but the judge could impose strict conditions, probation, education programs, maybe community service. I nodded, my resolve firm. I want her to face the consequences. Grace deserves that. Christopher came to the hospital that evening looking like he hadn't slept. Haley and Dylan trailed behind Haley, clutching a stuffed dolphin she'd bought for Grace. Kelly, Christopher said, his voice heavy. I saw the footage. I can't believe Denise did this. I keep replaying it, thinking I should have seen it coming. I looked at him, my anger softening slightly. Christopher, you weren't there. But you need to decide where you stand now. He glanced at Haley, who was sitting with Grace, showing her the dolphin. I'm filing for legal separation, he said quietly. I can't stay with someone who'd hurt Grace like that, who'd lie about it. Haley and Dylan deserve better. So does Grace. I was stunned. Christopher had always been quiet, letting Denise lead. What about the kids? I asked. I want them with me, he said. I'm looking at apartments near you so they can stay close to Grace. Denise was released on bail pending her hearing, but the family fallout was immediate. My parents, Susan and Thomas Watson, drove up from Denver the day Grace was discharged. Mom burst into tears when she saw Grace, her usually bright face pale and tired. My sweet girl, she said, hugging her gently. Dad pulled me aside, his jaw tight. Kelly, what Denise did is unforgivable. How's the case going? I filled him in the charges, the footage, the DA's stance. He nodded, his voice low. Good. She needs to face the music. But later, over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Mom's tone shifted. Kelly, are you sure about pressing charges? She's your sister. This could tear the family apart forever. I set my cup down, my voice steady. Mom, Denise nearly killed Grace. Family doesn't mean letting that slide. Dad backed me up. Susan Kelly's right. Denise crossed a line, we can't pretend otherwise. The pressure didn't stop there. My Aunt Linda called, her voice pleading. Kelly, think about Denise's kids. A trial will hurt Haley and Dylan. Can't you settle this privately? My cousin Mark texted, urging forgiveness. People make mistakes, Kelly. Don't ruin Denise's life over one bad call. Each message chipped away at me, but I held firm. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability, about protecting Grace from ever feeling that helpless again. I blocked Linda's number after her third call. My patience gone, Haley overheard me arguing with Mom and hugged me tight. Aunt Kelly, don't listen to them, she said. Mom was wrong, I saw it. Grace didn't deserve that. Her support so fierce for a 15-year-old kept me going. Denise's preliminary hearing was set for early November. The DA offered a plea deal. Denise would plead guilty to a reduced charge of misdemeanor child endangerment, avoiding jail time. In exchange, she'd get 2 years of probation, 100 hours of community service with a disability advocacy group, and mandatory education on developmental disabilities. I discussed it with Dr. Carter and my parents. A trial could be tough on Grace, Dr. Carter said. She'd likely have to testify, which could re-trigger her trauma. Mom agreed, her voice soft. Kelly, you've made your point. Denise is paying a price. Maybe this is enough? I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted Denise in court facing a judge's gavel, but Grace's nightmares were getting worse. And I didn't want her reliving that day in public. I agreed to the plea with one condition: a restraining order keeping Denise away from Grace. The judge accepted the deal, issuing the restraining order. Denise couldn't come within 100 yards of Grace or contact her for 2 years. Denise sat in the courtroom, her usual confidence gone, her eyes avoiding mine. Haley and Dylan weren't there. Christopher had taken them to stay with his parents, shielding them from the drama. After the hearing, Denise's lawyer approached me asking for a private meeting. I refused. There's nothing left to say, I told him. She made her choice when she pushed my daughter. As I walked out, I heard Denise's voice, low and shaky, talking to her lawyer. This is going to ruin me, she said. I kept walking, my focus on Grace, who was waiting at home with Cheryl. Grace's recovery was slow. Physically, her lungs were healing, but Dr. Carter warned the trauma could linger. She's afraid of water now, I told Cheryl one night watching Grace draw at the kitchen table. She won't even take baths, only showers, and even then she's jumpy. Cheryl nodded, her face grim. I'm still kicking myself for not stopping Denise sooner. I squeezed her hand. Cheryl, you saved her life. Don't carry that guilt. Grace's therapy sessions helped, using art to express her fear. One drawing showed a dark blue wave, a stick figure girl sinking. That's me, she said, quietly, pointing. My heart broke, but I stayed strong for her. You're here now, honey, I said, hugging her. And I'm never letting that happen again. Christopher followed through on his separation, renting an apartment 10 minutes from my house. Haley and Dylan started spending weekends with me and Grace, rebuilding their cousin bond. Haley was Grace's shadow, helping with her therapy exercises or reading her favorite books. Dylan was quieter, struggling with his mom's actions. Is Mom bad? He asked me one day, his voice small. I chose my words carefully. Dylan, your mom made a bad choice, but that doesn't mean she's all bad. You're not to blame for this, okay? He nodded, but his eyes stayed distant. Christopher joined us for a family meeting with Dr. Carter, learning how to support Grace's recovery. I've been blind, he admitted, his voice rough. I let Denise's attitude slide for too long. The family we had left was fractured, but stronger in its own way. My parents stopped pushing for reconciliation, focusing on Grace's healing. Mom spent hours baking cookies with her, while Dad took her to adaptive swim classes, shallow water only with Cheryl coaching. Haley's courage inspired me. She'd stood up to her mom, risking everything to protect Grace. "Your family, Haley," I told her one night, tucking her into the guest bed. "You always will be." She smiled, her eyes tired but warm. "I love Grace, Aunt Kelly. I'm glad you fought for her." As I turned off the light, I realized our family wasn't what it used to be. It was smaller, rawer, but built on truth, not excuses. Denise's actions had torn us apart, but they'd also shown me who really mattered. 3 months after the pool incident, Grace and I found a new rhythm, one built on healing and hope. Her nightmares about drowning eased thanks to weekly sessions with Dr. Emily Carter, who used art therapy to help Grace process her fear. One afternoon, Grace showed me a drawing, a bright pool with her swimming in the shallow end, Cheryl nearby with a big smile. "I'm not scared anymore, Mom," she said, her voice steady. I hugged her tight, my heart swelling. "You're so brave, sweetheart," I told her, kissing her forehead. Physically, Grace was back to herself, her lungs clear, but Dr. Susan Hayes warned we'd need regular checkups to monitor for lingering effects. Cheryl, my best friend, got Grace back into the pool, shallow water only with floaties and constant supervision. Watching Grace splash and laugh again, I felt a weight lift, though the memory of that day still stung. Our family wasn't the same. It couldn't be after what Denise did. My sister's plea deal kept her out of jail, but the restraining order meant she couldn't come near Grace. Denise moved to a nearby town, claiming a fresh start, but word spread fast in Fort Collins. Friends and neighbors stopped inviting her to gatherings, her real estate business took a hit, and she faded from our lives. I didn't wish her pain, but I wasn't sorry she'd made her choice when she pushed my daughter into danger. Christopher stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. He finalized his separation, settling into an apartment close to our house. Haley and Dylan spent most weekends with us, their laughter filling our home again. Christopher joined us for family dinners, asking questions about Grace's Down syndrome, learning how to support her. "I was blind to Denise's behavior," he admitted one night, his voice low. "I'm trying to make it right, Kelly." I nodded, seeing his effort. "Keep showing up, Christopher," I said. "That's what matters." Haley became Grace's fiercest protector. She'd read to her help with her therapy exercises or just sit and braid her hair. One evening, as they giggled over a cartoon, Haley pulled me aside. "Aunt Kelly, I want to be a special education teacher someday." She said, her eyes bright. "Because of Grace, she's so strong, you know." I smiled, my throat tight. "That's not weird at all, Haley," I said. "You're already her hero." Dylan was slower to adjust, still grappling with his mom's actions. During a game night, he asked quietly, "Will Mom ever say sorry to Grace?" I chose my words carefully. "I hope so, Dylan, but it's up to her to change. You're not responsible for that." He nodded, shuffling his cards, a small step toward understanding. My parents, Susan and Thomas Watson, became our anchor. Mom spent hours with Grace, teaching her new recipes or playing board games. Dad took her to adaptive swim classes, cheering louder than anyone when she mastered a new stroke. "You're a champ, Grace," he'd say, his eyes shining. They stopped pushing me to forgive Denise, focusing instead on rebuilding what we had. "We lost something with your sister," Mom told me one Sunday, her voice soft. "But we've gained something stronger with you and Grace." I hugged her, grateful for their clarity. A local disability advocacy group, Inclusive Horizons, reached out after hearing about our story. Their director, Lisa Bennett, invited us to a family event. "Grace needs to know she's not alone," Lisa said over coffee, her warmth genuine. "And Kelly, you do too. Fighting family like this is isolating." She was right. At the event, Grace made friends with other kids with Down syndrome, her laughter echoing across the accessible playground. I connected with parents who'd faced similar battles, relatives dismissing their kids' needs, ignoring medical limits. Sharing our story with Grace's permission felt like turning pain into purpose. "You're giving us a voice," one mom told me, her eyes teary. "People need to hear this." Lisa encouraged me to speak at Inclusive Horizons monthly meetings. My first talk was nerve-wracking, standing before a room of parents and advocates. But I told our story: Denise's prank, Grace's trauma, the fight for accountability. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. "You're showing us how to stand firm," a dad said afterward. That talk led to more guest lectures at a community college's education program, workshops for families navigating ableism. Each time I spoke, I saw Grace in my mind, her resilience pushing me forward. "You're famous, Mom," she teased one day, grinning at a flyer with my name. I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Only because of you, honey." Christopher joined a support group for family members of disabled kids learning to be a better ally. At a picnic 6 months after the incident, he brought Haley and Dylan, who played an adapted game of tag with Grace, their laughter blending under the Colorado sun. My parents were there, Mom snapping photos, Dad grilling burgers. Cheryl coached the kids, her whistle sharp and cheerful. As I watched Grace chase Haley, her movements careful but joyful, I realized our family had changed. Smaller, yes, but honest, grounded in respect for Grace as she was. Denise's absence was a shadow, but it didn't dim our light. One night, as Grace and I sorted photos for a school project, she paused at an old picture of our whole family. Denise included, all smiles at a reunion years ago. "We looked happy," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But it wasn't real, was it?" I took her hand, choosing my words. "Parts were real, sweetheart, my love for you, Haley's grandma and grandpa's. But some of it was hiding problems we didn't face." She nodded, picking a newer photo from her birthday, just us, Haley, Dylan, and my parents. "This one's better," she said. "It's true." I pulled her close, my heart full. Our journey wasn't easy, but it taught us what family really means: standing up for what's right, even when it hurts, and choosing love that sees you for you.